I still remember the day the wind rolled across the plains like it carried a warning in its breath. The sky above the small frontier town of Red Hollow looked wide and endless, yet it felt heavier than stone. Dust clung to boots, to door frames, to dreams that had begun to fade. In towns like this, people worked hard, prayed quietly, and trusted the wrong promises too often. It was the kind of place where debts grew faster than crops, and where pride could cost a family everything. At the edge of town stood a modest wooden house painted pale blue, its shutters worn by sun and sorrow. Inside lived a young mother named Callista Vale. She was known for her gentle voice and steady hands. Her husband had passed the previous winter, leaving behind nothing but unpaid notes and a field too dry to save. Callista carried more than grief. She carried her infant son, a child with bright eyes and a curious smile that could melt even the hardest heart. She named him Elier, a name meaning light, because she believed he would bring it back into her world. But light does not always reach places where fear has settled. The town's leading creditor, a stern and unbending man named Bartholomew Crane, owned the general store, the grain contracts, and the patience of no one. He wore polished boots and spoke with a calm voice that hid sharp edges. Crane had lent money to Callista's husband, with papers written in fine print and promises that seemed harmless at first. When the harvest failed, the debt grew heavier. When winter came, the numbers doubled. By spring, Crane demanded payment in a way that left no room for mercy. Callista had tried everything. She stitched garments for travelers. She baked bread before dawn. She even sold her wedding ring to keep food on the table. Yet the debt remained. Crane's visits became frequent, his presence filling the house like a shadow that would not leave. He spoke of contracts, of law, of obligation. He reminded her that debts must be honored in this land. One evening, under a sky turning amber with sunset, Crane delivered his final demand. He stood in her doorway, hat in hand, expression controlled. The town watched from across the street, pretending not to listen. When Callista could not pay, Crane proposed a settlement that made her hands tremble. The debt would be cleared if she surrendered something of equal value. His meaning was not spoken loudly, but it was understood by all who stood nearby. In the harsh arithmetic of desperation, he believed a child could count as repayment. Callista felt the world tilt beneath her feet. She held Elier close, his small fingers gripping her dress, as if sensing the storm in the air. She refused at first, her voice shaking yet firm. But the papers were signed long ago. The town laws were on Crane's side. And in Red Hollow, few dared to challenge him. That night, Callista did not sleep. She sat beside the cradle, listening to her son breathe. Every sound felt sacred. Every silence felt dangerous. She wondered how a land built on freedom could demand such a price from a mother. She wondered if anyone would stand with her, or if compassion had left town entirely. The following morning, Crane returned with 2 men. They carried no weapons in sight, yet their presence felt like iron. Word had spread quickly. Some neighbors closed their windows. Others avoided eye contact. A few offered quiet sympathy, but no action. Fear is a powerful neighbor in small towns. As the men approached the house, a different sound entered the street. It was the steady rhythm of hooves, calm and unhurried. A rider appeared at the far end of Red Hollow. He wore simple clothing worn by travel and weather. His posture was upright, his expression unreadable. The horse beneath him moved with disciplined grace. He did not hurry. He did not announce himself, simply observed. The townspeople whispered. They recognized him as a traveler from the open lands beyond the river, one who moved between settlements without asking for permission. His name was said in low tones. Kalen Redhawk, a man known for silence rather than speeches, for presence rather than threats. He was neither friend nor enemy to Red Hollow, yet he seemed to belong to the horizon itself. Kalen stopped near the crowd but did not dismount immediately. His dark eyes moved from Crane to Callista, to the child in her arms. Something shifted in the air, though no one could name it. He dismounted with slow precision, as if every movement carried meaning. Crane straightened, attempting authority. He reminded Kalen that this was town business. He spoke of contracts and ownership. His voice remained controlled, but tension tightened around his words. Kalen did not argue. He did not raise his voice. Instead, He approached Callista and knelt slightly to meet her gaze. His silence was not empty. It felt deliberate, steady, protective. Callista met his eyes and felt an unfamiliar sense of relief, though she did not yet understand why. Crane demanded that Kaylin step aside. The law was clear, he insisted. The child would serve as repayment. The debt would be settled. Kaylin finally spoke, his voice low and even. He asked one question, asked to see the original contract. The request surprised Crane but did not alarm him. The document was produced, unfolded, and held in the sunlight. Kaylin studied every line without haste. The crowd leaned closer, waiting. Then something unexpected happened. Kaylin pointed out a clause written in small ink near the bottom of the page. The terms required that any transfer of obligation must be witnessed by two impartial parties and recorded at the county office before enforcement. No such record existed. The witnesses named on the paper were employees of Crane's store. The crowd murmured. Crane's composure cracked for the first time. Kaylin rose to his full height, still calm. He stated that the claim was not yet legally binding. He did not accuse loudly. He did not threaten. He simply declared the truth as written. The air grew still. Callista felt hope flicker in her chest, fragile but alive. Crane's face tightened, insisted that town custom mattered more than distant regulations. But the people were listening now. Doubt had entered the street. Kaylin turned to Callista and asked if she wished to fight the claim. Her answer was barely a whisper, yet it carried courage born from love for her son. Before anything else could happen, a sudden commotion rose from the direction of the store. One of Crane's men had ridden off earlier. He now returned with unexpected news that made Crane's expression drain of color. What was said next caused every conversation in Red Hollow to stop completely. Callista clutched Elliot closer as Kaylin stepped forward, eyes fixed on Crane, waiting for the truth to surface. The wind picked up again, carrying dust across the street and obscuring the view. When it cleared, the entire town understood that nothing would remain the same. And in that moment, with the debt unsettled, the contract challenged, and the silent rider standing between a mother and her child, the question hung in the air like a drawn breath waiting to be released. The news that arrived with the rider spread through Red Hollow like smoke through dry grass. People leaned close to one another, speaking in hushed tones while Callista stood still, trying to understand what had just shifted in the air. Kaylin Redhawk did not move away from her side. He remained steady, as if he had chosen this place long before anyone noticed. Bartholomew Crane stared at the man who had questioned his contract. The confidence he once carried now looked thinner, stretched tight over uncertainty. Whatever message had come with the returning rider had unsettled him, yet he tried to hide it behind a firm posture. The townspeople watched carefully. For years they had depended on Crane for supplies and credit, even when his terms felt harsh. But today something felt different. Kaylin did not raise his voice again. He asked the returning rider to speak clearly. The man reported that the county office had already received notice of an investigation regarding disputed land contracts in neighboring towns. Names were not spoken aloud in the street, but it was clear that Crane's practices were under quiet review. The timing was not accidental. Someone had been looking closely at his papers for some time. Callista felt her heart beat faster. She had never imagined that her small struggle might be part of something larger. She had believed her family's debt was a private burden. Now she wondered how many others had faced similar pressure in silence. The thought made her both afraid and strangely less alone. Kaylin turned toward the crowd and spoke with measured calm. He explained that when contracts are written fairly, they protect both sides. But when terms are hidden or witnesses are not independent, the agreement loses strength. His words were simple, yet they carried weight. He did not accuse Crane directly. He only described what was visible to everyone. Crane attempted to regain control of the moment. He reminded the town that he had supported many families during difficult seasons. He said that without his loans, several farms would have failed completely. His tone suggested loyalty, even sacrifice. Some townspeople shifted uncomfortably, remembering times when his store had kept them fed. The argument was not about kindness alone. It was about power, trust, and the fine line between help and harm. Red Hollow depended on trade and credit, and Crane held much of that influence. Challenging him could bring consequences for the whole community. As the sun moved lower in the sky, shadows stretched across the street. Callista remained beside her doorway, holding Elior close. The child looked around with wide curiosity, unaware of the tension, but sensitive to his mother's emotion. She brushed his hair gently, trying to steady herself. Kaelin asked Callista if she had ever received a copy of the contract when it was first signed. She shook her head. Her husband had handled the paperwork. She trusted him, and she trusted the man who offered the loan. At that time, hope had been stronger than doubt. She had believed the harvest would succeed. Kaelin nodded, as if confirming something he already suspected. He then asked whether anyone in town had witnessed the signing outside of Crane's store. No one answered immediately. After a moment, an older shopkeeper named Darius Hale stepped forward. With careful words, he admitted that he had been present but had not read the document fully. He had assumed everything was standard. This small admission changed the atmosphere. It revealed how easily trust could be taken for granted. It also showed how the town's routines had allowed one person to hold too much control. Crane's expression hardened. He realized that the situation was no longer confined to Callista alone. Questions were forming, and questions could lead to broader scrutiny. He insisted that he had followed common frontier practice. But frontier practice was not always written law. Kaelin then addressed Callista directly. He spoke gently, asking whether she felt her son was truly part of the contract terms, or if that demand had been implied through pressure. His question was not dramatic. It was careful and respectful. Callista looked down at Elior, feeling the warmth of his small body. The thought that anyone would claim him in exchange for debt filled her with quiet determination. She answered that she had never agreed to surrender her child. Her voice was soft but firm. The town listened closely. The returning rider approached Kaelin and whispered something only he could hear. Kellen's expression changed slightly, though he remained composed. It seemed there was additional information from the county office that had not yet been made public. Crane noticed the exchange and grew visibly tense. The wind picked up again, carrying the scent of distant rain. Some townspeople looked toward the horizon, wondering whether change was coming not just for one family, but for the entire community. Callista noticed something else in Kellen's behavior. Though he stood in defense of fairness, his attention often returned to her and her son. There was no display of force, no grand speech. Instead, there was quiet protection. His presence felt like a shield placed without demand for recognition. Yet the situation remained unresolved. The contract had been questioned, but not fully settled. The county investigation had only begun. Crane's authority still held influence, and many in town depended on his store. A single decision could disrupt livelihoods. As evening approached, Crane announced that he would seek immediate enforcement through local officials. He warned that interfering with debt collection could have legal consequences. His tone suggested that he was prepared to escalate the matter. Kaelin did not respond with anger, simply said that truth would stand once all records were reviewed. He reminded the town that fairness benefits everyone in the long run. His calm confidence unsettled Crane more than any threat could have. Callista felt torn between hope and fear. She had witnessed a crack in Crane's certainty, yet the conflict was far from finished. She understood that challenging power required patience. The next steps would determine not only her future, but perhaps the balance of Red Hollow itself. That night, as lanterns lit the street, whispers filled the town. Some people spoke in support of Callista, moved by her courage. Others feared retaliation. The community seemed divided, caught between loyalty to tradition and desire for justice. Kaelin remained outside Callista's home for a long while after the crowd dispersed. He did not enter without invitation. Instead, he stood watchful, as if waiting for the next development. His silence was not withdrawal. It was readiness. Inside the house, Callista placed Elie in his cradle and sat nearby. She tried to rest, but her mind replayed every moment. The contract, the witnesses, the investigation, the shifting reactions of neighbors. She sensed that this was only the beginning of something larger. From the window, she could see Kellen's silhouette against the fading light. His presence brought comfort, yet also reminded her that the struggle was ongoing. Crane had not surrendered. The officials had not yet ruled, and the outcome remained uncertain. Far beyond the town, clouds gathered slowly, hinting at whether that might arrive with force. Whether that force would come in the form of law, confrontation, or something unexpected was impossible to tell. Red Hollow waited. Callista waited. And Kaelin stood between past injustice and an unfolding future. knowing that the next move would decide far more than one debt. While the night settled over the plains with quiet anticipation, morning arrived slowly over Red Hollow, washing the rooftops in pale gold light, but the peace did not return with the sun. The town felt different now. People walked with quieter steps. Doors opened only halfway. Conversations ended when strangers approached. The dispute over the debt had become more than a private matter. It had turned into a test of loyalty, law, and courage. Callista Vale woke before dawn, listening to the soft breathing of her son. Elier slept peacefully, unaware that his future had been placed under public scrutiny. She touched his tiny hand and felt a wave of determination rise inside her. She had lived through grief, hunger, and loneliness, but losing her child was a fear she could not accept. The thought gave her strength, even as uncertainty pressed against her heart. Outside, Kalen Redhawk spoke quietly with several townspeople who had gathered near the store. He did not demand attention. He invited it. He asked questions about past agreements, about how loans were recorded, about whether anyone had ever seen the full terms before signing. Some answered honestly. Others avoided his gaze. The conversation revealed how much of the town's economy depended on trust that had never been tested. Bartholomew Crane remained inside his store for most of the morning. Through the window, he observed the growing discussions. His expression was controlled, yet his hands moved restlessly across his desk. Investigation mentioned the night before had clearly unsettled him. Still, he was not a man who surrendered easily. He began sending messages to associates in nearby settlements, seeking support and reassurance. One of those messages reached a neighboring ranch owner named Lucien Holt. Lucien had borrowed funds from Crane years ago to expand his cattle operations. He had paid regularly, but he knew how quickly debt could grow if conditions changed. Lucien arrived in town by midday, riding with a cautious expression. He was not openly allied with either side, but he understood that the outcome of this conflict could affect regional trade routes and future credit agreements. Lucien spoke privately with Crane first. Their conversation remained out of earshot, yet their body language suggested urgency. Afterward, Lucien walked through town, observing the atmosphere. He noticed that the townspeople were not fully siding with Crane as they once had. Something in the air had shifted. People were thinking more carefully about fairness and accountability. Meanwhile, Callista received unexpected support from an elderly seamstress named Adelaide Mercer. Adelaide had quietly helped several families over the years, offering clothing on delayed payment without formal contracts. She visited Callista's home and shared stories of others who had faced harsh repayment demands. Presence reminded Callista that she was not alone in her experience. Yet Adelaide also warned that challenging powerful creditors could bring pressure in return. Kalen continued reviewing documents with Darius Hale, shopkeeper who had admitted witnessing the contract signing. Together they compared signatures and dates. Kalen asked careful questions about storage of records and whether copies had been filed properly. Darius confessed that the town office often relied on trust rather than strict verification. This revelation deepened the complexity of the conflict. It was not just about one agreement. It was about a system that had operated with limited oversight for years. As afternoon light spread across the plains, tension grew. Crane announced that he would request immediate enforcement through local authorities. He claimed that delaying collection would harm his business and weaken the town's financial stability. Some residents worried he might withdraw credit entirely if challenged. That fear created division among neighbors, splitting opinions between economic survival and moral responsibility. Callista felt the weight of that division. She did not want the town to suffer because of her situation, yet she could not agree to an unfair demand. She wondered whether there was a path that protected both her son and the community. The question had no simple answer. Kalen visited her again that evening. He did not offer promises. Instead, he spoke about balance. He explained that communities thrive when agreements are transparent and when disputes are handled through proper channels. His tone carried quiet confidence. He seemed less concerned with winning and more focused on ensuring justice followed the correct process. While they spoke, Lucien Holt approached the house from the street. He had heard conflicting accounts and wanted clarity before choosing a side. Lucien respected Crane's business contributions, but also valued fairness. He asked Kalen about the investigation details. Kalen shared only confirmed facts, avoiding speculation. This careful approach impressed Lucien, though he did not yet declare support. Inside the store, Crane drafted additional statements to strengthen his claim. He prepared to argue that, even if technical steps were incomplete, the intent of the agreement was clear. His determination showed that he believed firmly in his interpretation of responsibility. Yet beneath his resolve was concern that his authority might weaken if the town began questioning his practices. By nightfall, rumors spread across Red Hollow. Some said the county officials would arrive within days. Others claimed Crane planned to accelerate enforcement before any review could occur. The uncertainty created restless energy throughout the town. People checked their doors more often. Conversations became cautious. Callista remained composed in appearance, but her thoughts were active. She considered what it would mean to stand before officials. She wondered if speaking openly would help her case or increase risk. Kalen assured her that truth spoken calmly often carries strength. Still, he acknowledged that outcomes depend on evidence and timing. That evening, a messenger arrived at Crane's store carrying official correspondence. The contents were not shared publicly, but Crane's reaction was noticeable. His jaw tightened, and he immediately instructed his staff to secure important files. The town sensed that a significant development had occurred, though details remained hidden. Kalen observed from a distance. His expression suggested awareness of deeper layers to the situation. He seemed to anticipate resistance from Crane, yet he remained steady. His role was not to dominate the conflict, but to ensure fairness remained visible. As darkness settled, Callista stepped outside briefly. The air was cool, and the plains stretched endlessly beyond the town lights. Kalen stood nearby, watching the horizon. For a moment, their shared silence felt like a promise of protection, though neither of them could predict the next turn. Crane, inside his office, prepared for confrontation. Lucien returned to his ranch that night, still undecided. Adelaide prayed quietly for peace. The town itself seemed suspended between two futures. The debt dispute had expanded beyond numbers on paper. It now involved legal review, community trust, economic stability, and personal courage. Each perspective carried weight, and none could be ignored. Yet the investigation had not concluded. The officials had not arrived. The contract had not been ruled valid or invalid. Every side was preparing, waiting, and watching. And in the quiet hours before the next day, Red Hollow held its breath, knowing that whatever happened next would reshape the town's balance of power. While Callista kept her son close, and Kalen remained near, ready for whatever decision the morning light would bring. The next morning did not feel ordinary in Red Hollow. The air was tense, like the moment before a storm breaks open the sky. Callista Vale sensed it as soon as she stepped outside with Elie in her arms. The streets were already filling with people, not for market business, but because word had spread that county officials were arriving to review the disputed debt contract. Kalen Redhawk stood near the center of town, calm as ever, though his eyes moved constantly, reading the faces around him. He had learned long ago that truth alone does not win conflicts. It must be shown clearly, with patience and courage. Today would test both. Bartholomew Crane remained inside his store until the sound of horses approached from the eastern road. When he finally stepped out, he wore his most formal coat, trying to project authority. Behind him, his clerks carried carefully organized files, prepared to defend every page of the agreement. Crane believed strongly that his financial practices had supported Red Hollow for years. To him, this was not cruelty. It was business. 3 county officials arrived in a simple carriage, led by a firm woman named Eleanor Whitcomb. Her presence immediately changed the tone of the gathering. She carried documents and spoke with quiet confidence. The crowd formed a wide circle around the main street, creating a natural courtroom in open air. Eleanor requested the original contract and any copies filed in town records. Kalen stepped forward to assist, not to speak over anyone, but to ensure accuracy. Darius Hale confirmed where the documents had been stored. Lucien Holt stood nearby, observing carefully. Understanding that the outcome could influence credit systems across nearby ranches, Callista held her son closer as discussions began. She did not wish to appear weak, yet she could not hide her emotion. Every sentence spoken in that street carried weight for her future. Elie reached toward the sunlight, unaware of the legal storm forming around him. Eleanor examined the contract thoroughly. She compared signatures, witness names, and the required filing procedures. As she read, The crowd remained silent. Crane stood rigid, hands clasped behind his back. Kalen waited without expression, but his posture suggested readiness for whatever truth emerged. Questions began to surface. Officials asked about witness independence. They asked whether the document had been recorded properly before enforcement. Darius confirmed that the town office had never received a formal copy. This detail caused murmurs across the crowd. Some residents exchanged worried glances, realizing how easily paperwork could be overlooked in busy seasons. Crane attempted to clarify. He explained that frontier conditions often required flexibility. He insisted that the agreement had been understood by all involved. His voice remained controlled, yet tension showed in his jaw. He emphasized that if debts were not honored, lenders would lose confidence, and the town's economy could weaken. Eleanor listened without interruption. She reminded everyone that fairness and proper procedure protect both borrowers and lenders. She did not accuse anyone yet, but her questions grew more detailed. The atmosphere tightened further. At one point, Lucian Holt stepped forward voluntarily. He explained that he had also reviewed similar contracts in his own ranch dealings. He admitted that some clauses had been difficult to interpret. His words did not attack Crane, but they reinforced the need for clarity in financial agreements. This added complexity to the discussion, showing that the issue extended beyond one family. Callista felt her hands tremble as she was invited to speak. She walked slowly to the center of the circle, standing beside Kalen. Her voice was soft but steady. She described how the debt had grown, how she had tried to repay through honest work, and how she had never agreed to surrender her child. She spoke about Eliar's future, about her desire for justice without harming the town. Her words carried emotion that no written document could express. Several townspeople wiped their eyes quietly. The romantic strength of a mother defending her child touched even those who had once supported Crane. Eleanor asked Callista one final question about her understanding of the contract at the time of signing. Callista admitted that she had trusted her husband's judgment and had not studied every line. She believed in good faith agreements. Her honesty added depth to the investigation, revealing how trust and desperation can intersect during hardship. The officials then requested time to review everything in private. Carriage doors closed, and they withdrew to a nearby building to analyze the evidence. The town waited in restless silence. This pause felt heavier than any argument. During the waiting period, Crane approached Kalen. Their conversation remained low, but intense. Crane questioned why Kalen had interfered. Kalen responded calmly that he did not interfere with debt collection itself, only with fairness and legal accuracy. He emphasized that communities grow stronger when disputes are resolved transparently. Crane's pride was clearly challenged, yet he also understood that if the investigation found procedural errors, his authority might face restrictions. For the first time, uncertainty entered his expression fully. Callista stood at the edge of the street, watching the officials building. Eliar began to cry softly, perhaps sensing the tension. She soothed him gently, whispering reassurances that she hoped would soon become reality. As afternoon approached, dark clouds gathered above Red Hollow. The air felt charged, as though nature itself anticipated a turning point. People remained in place, unwilling to miss the announcement. Conversations stopped entirely. Inside the building, Eleanor's team finished reviewing the documents. Their faces were serious as they prepared to return to the town square. Every heart in Red Hollow began to beat faster. The moment of decision was near, yet no one knew which direction it would lean. Kalen moved closer to Callista. He did not promise outcomes. Instead, he reminded her that truth, once examined carefully, cannot be hidden forever. His steady presence gave her strength, but the final words had not yet been spoken. Crane adjusted his coat and waited with controlled posture. Lucian watched from the side, aware that, whichever way the ruling went, changes would follow. The community stood on the edge of transformation. When the officials finally stepped back into the street, silence fell completely. Eleanor held the reviewed documents in her hand. Her expression revealed that the announcement would carry significant consequences. Callista tightened her grip on Eliar. Kellen's gaze remained focused and calm. Crane's face was unreadable, but tension was undeniable. The air felt still, almost suspended in time, as everyone prepared to hear the decision that would determine not only a contract's validity, but the future of trust, justice, and hope in Red Hollow. And in that charged moment, with the town watching and hearts aligned in expectation, the outcome hovered just beyond spoken words. The most decisive instant yet to come. Eleanor Whitcomb stepped forward into the center of Red Hollow with calm authority. The town held its breath as she began to speak. Her voice was steady, clear, and respectful. She explained that after reviewing the debt contract, the witness records, and the town filing system, the officials had found serious procedural gaps. The agreement had never been properly recorded at the county level, and the enforcement steps taken were not legally complete. Because of that, the demand to transfer the child as payment had no lawful standing. A wave of quiet relief moved through the crowd. Callista Vale felt her knees weaken, and Kaylin Redhawk gently placed a steady hand near her shoulder to support her balance. Elior reached upward with a small smile, unaware that his future had just been protected by careful review and lawful process. Callista's eyes filled with tears, not of fear now, but of gratitude and exhaustion. Eleanor continued, stating that while the debt itself remained a matter between the parties, the terms had to follow proper legal standards. She confirmed that the contract would be revised under supervision, ensuring transparency and fairness. Any repayment plan would need to be reasonable and recorded correctly. No personal claim over a child could ever be enforced under these circumstances. Bartholomew Crane stood silent. For the first time since this conflict began, he did not speak immediately. The realization settled in that his practices, though common in some frontier communities, required adjustment to meet formal legal expectations. His face showed disappointment, but also understanding. The county investigation was not meant to destroy him. It was meant to bring order and accountability to debt collection practices. Lucine Holt stepped forward carefully. He acknowledged that clearer documentation would help ranchers and store owners alike. He suggested forming a town committee to review financial agreements and ensure both lenders and borrowers understood every clause. His proposal was practical and forward-thinking, and several residents nodded in agreement. Eleanor approved the idea of local oversight, recommending that Red Hollow maintain transparent records going forward. She emphasized that community trust is strongest when supported by proper procedure and shared responsibility. Her tone was not harsh, it was guiding. Officials concluded that Callista would not lose her child. The debt dispute would return to a structured repayment review under lawful supervision. Crane would need to submit updated documentation if he wished to continue enforcement. Until then, no action could be taken against Callista or her home. The crowd slowly began to relax. Conversations restarted in gentle tones. Some neighbors approached Callista with quiet support. Adelaide Mercer embraced her warmly, reminding her that courage often begins in the most difficult moments. Darius Hale apologized for not questioning the paperwork sooner, promising to help improve record-keeping in the future. Crane approached Callista next. His expression was serious, but no longer aggressive. He admitted that he had believed he was operating within accepted frontier custom. While the debt still existed, he agreed to work with the county officials to create a fair repayment structure. His voice carried humility that had not been present before. Callista listened carefully. She thanked him for agreeing to cooperate. She did not celebrate his loss, because this was not about winning. It was about justice and balance. She hoped that the town could move forward without bitterness. Her tone reflected maturity beyond her years, shaped by hardship and love. Kaylin remained nearby, observing the transformation. He did not claim credit for the outcome. When some townspeople thanked him, he responded simply that truth and patience had done the work. His role had been to ensure the process was visible and fair. He had stood silently because he believed in allowing proper systems to speak for themselves. As the officials prepared to leave Red Hollow, Eleanor offered guidance for future financial agreements. She encouraged education on contract terms, clearer witness procedures, and public filing systems. The town agreed to establish a small council to review important documents. Lucien volunteered to participate. Adelaide offered to help families understand their rights before signing anything in the future. With the legal dispute resolved, the tension that had weighed on the town began to lift. People returned to their routines with renewed awareness. Conversations about debt management, trust, and responsibility became common topics in the days that followed. Red Hollow had learned valuable lessons about transparency and accountability. Callista walked home that evening with Elior in her arms. The sky glowed softly as the sun set, painting the plains in warm colors. Kalen accompanied them silently. When they reached her door, he stopped for a moment. Their eyes met, and in that shared look there was gratitude, respect, and quiet understanding. No dramatic words were exchanged, but a bond had formed through shared struggle and mutual trust. In the weeks that followed, the town's new oversight committee began reviewing contracts. Crane participated in the process, adjusting his methods to align with formal requirements. His business gradually regained stability as trust slowly returned. Customers felt more confident knowing agreements were documented properly. Callista resumed her sewing work, but now with greater security. Neighbors supported her, and she supported them in return. Eliere grew stronger, surrounded by a community that had chosen fairness over fear. The debt dispute had transformed into an opportunity for reform rather than division. Kalen did not remain in Red Hollow permanently, but he visited often. His presence became a symbol of calm strength and quiet integrity. Some believed he had arrived at just the right moment by chance. Others felt his timing reflected deeper purpose. Either way, his influence helped guide the town toward balanced progress. Over time, Red Hollow became known not only for its wide plains, but also for its improved financial transparency and strong community bonds. The story of the baby who was nearly taken for debt spread across neighboring settlements as an example of how proper legal review, courage, and collective responsibility can protect families. Callista often stood outside her home at sunset, holding Eliere and reflecting on how close she had come to losing everything. She understood now that asking for help was not weakness. Speaking up was not shameful. Seeking fairness was an act of love. Her journey reminded others that debt disputes must be handled with transparency and compassion. Kellen's silent ride into town became part of local history, symbolizing steady protection without force. Crane's willingness to adapt showed that growth is possible even after conflict. Lucien's support demonstrated that cooperation strengthens communities. Eleanor's careful leadership ensured that justice was applied fairly and respectfully. In the end, Red Hollow did not experience victory through confrontation. It experienced renewal through lawful process, open dialogue, and human connection. The debt was addressed, the child remained safe, and the town adopted better financial practices for the future. Callista's story became a reminder that even in difficult frontier times, fairness can prevail when people stand together. The plains remained wide, the wind continued to move across the land, and life returned to its rhythm. Yet something had changed forever. A trust had been tested and strengthened. And as Eliere laughed beneath the open sky, Callista knew that her courage, combined with the silent strength of a rider named Kalen, had helped reshape not only her family's future, but the heart of Red Hollow itself, leaving behind a legacy of justice, hope, and lasting peace. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to our channel. Your support means a lot and gives us the courage to create even more exciting tales.